Hi, my name is Will Pincek, and I'm going to do a learning byte here on Contrail Enterprise Multicloud, specifically the Brownfield Underlay use case. So what is the Brownfield Underlay use case? This is where, from the Contrail command user interface, you will discover and onboard an existing IP fabric so that the fabric management features of Contrail Enterprise Multicloud can be utilized. So what does that mean? So after the IP Fabric's devices have been discovered and onboarded onto Contrail Enterprise Multicloud, again, Contrail Enterprise Multicloud is now aware of those devices and can configure them automatically for you, specifically things related to EVPN VXLAN. And for anybody who's ever configured EVPN VXLAN on a QFX device, which is typically what your IP fabric is going to be built out of, you know that it's pretty tedious kind of a configuration. Like for instance, if you wanted to add two bare metal servers to top of rack switches and you wanted to route between them over an EVPN VXLAN overlay, that's quite a task. What Contrail Enterprise Multicloud is bringing to the table, at least its fabric management features, is going to automatically configure that stuff for you. Okay, so what are the things that can automatically configure in the EVPN MPBGP sessions between all the IP fabric nodes as well as the Contrail control node, so that you can actually route overlay traffic between VMs and bare metal servers, which implies that you can also do this. You can now add bare metal servers to your EVPN VXLAN overlay, add them to the IP fabric, and be able to pass traffic over overlay network. You'll be able to establish virtual networks between Contrail virtual networks between VMs and containers, as always, plus bare metal servers that are hanging off of your IP fabric over these Contrail overlay networks, which are based on EVPN VXLAN. And then the fabric management features of Contrail Enterprise Multicloud will also configure that centralized routing configuration where you're doing the routing on the spines for your EVPN VXLAN overlay networks. And there's also some more stuff you can do. You can, for instance, upgrade the Junos version on each of your IP fabric devices. So there's that. So in order to do the Brownfield underlay, what must be existing? Well, first you have to have an IP fabric, and you need to be able to route properly. And I'll show you what proper routing is. Now, we support most any protocol. So BGP, OSPF, ISIS is fine, because Contrail Enterprise Multicloud is not going to configure the underlay routing protocol. It's expected that this existing IP fabric, all the routing is already established. Okay, and then there must be a Contrail cluster that's accessible from the Contrail command user interface, which it generally is during the installation process. And then there needs to be a management network that each IP fabric node and Contrail cluster node attaches to. So what is that? So here's our out-of-band management topology. So this is that last bullet. This is that topology that it's referring to. Okay. So where am I? Let's get back to this diagram. Sorry, I had to switch over for a second. Okay, so again, what I have here is our out-of-band management topology. Number one, I've got the devices that are going to be discovered. These are my IP fabric nodes. These are their management interfaces attached to this management subnet, 172.25.11. Remember that because we're going to use that in the wizard. These devices are just hanging off here to be discovered by the Contrail control node, essentially, which we'll see here in a second. But right now, they're just attached to the same subnet as the management subnets of my Contrail cluster, which I have an existing Contrail cluster. I have an OpenStack node for VM orchestration. We've got a Contrail control node that does the Contrail control functions plus analytics and all the other fun stuff, the web UI. There's two compute nodes, two OpenStack compute nodes that are also acting as Contrail V routers, and also a CSN that provides DHCP and DNS for any bare metal servers that we might add to our IP fabric later. And then we also have a new server called the command server, which runs the command user interface, which we'll work with to run the Brownfield wizard that will help discover these devices, that will instruct the control node to onboard discover and onboard and configure these devices that it learns on this subnet. So this is existing. So this is exactly what our topology is. Now, what I'm showing you is the management subnet. These devices here have interfaces, have data interfaces. This is the management interface, but our Contrail data interfaces are up above here. And there's also our IP fabric topology that we're not showing you here. So if I go one step further, this is actually what I like to call our Inband topology, where I have an actual IP fabric built on those two QFX 5100s as leaf nodes. I've got a spine node of a QFX 10K. Okay, I've got eBGP running between each of them so that I'm also redistributing loopback interfaces as well as this GIGI 002 and 002 over here into BGP so that I can ping from one subnet to another. That's very important that these devices should be able to reach each other. And also now we see our data interfaces for the devices now as opposed to the management. So again, it's really important that you have an underlay built and that routing that you can route properly here. Now, I used eBGP here, but the routing protocol that you use between these devices doesn't matter as long as it routes properly. That is, I can ping from this control node, for instance, to this compute node at a minimum, but also another minimum to this is I also need to be able to ping the loopback interfaces of these devices from the control node. And the reason why is this. After the Brownfield onboarding, what you're going to get auto-configured is an EVPN overlay. And the QFX10K is going to act as a route reflector in our topology. And its clients, as a route reflector, its clients are going to be the top of rack switches, as well as the control node. And it's going to allow these devices to advertise EVPN VXLAN routes between each other. Okay, so that we can do things like add bare metal servers off of these leaf switches and be able to connect them to over a Contrail virtual network to some VMs that are hosted on these compute nodes. Okay, so this will be the final. This stuff will all get auto-configured, these MP IBGP sessions, right? Again, these sessions won't come up from or at least this session on the control node won't come up unless I can reach the loopback of the QFX10K. Okay? All right, so it's real important that I can get to the loopbacks from any of these devices. So there's that. So this will be the resulting overlay. And there's that. Let's see what else. Oh, so one thing I wanted to show you is, okay, if I go back, or actually, we know that this is a spine node in my IP fabric. These are leaf nodes. But during the Brownfield, when you're in the wizard, you're going to have to assign roles to these devices. What I'm showing you here on the 10K is I've assigned two roles. There's the route reflector role, which is a required role on a spine. At least one spine has to have that route reflector role, and it does the route reflection that I talked about earlier. And then you have to give it at least one other role. There's two possible. There's the CRB gateway role, or there's the DC gateway role, okay, that you can assign to a spine, and I'll tell you what that is in a second. On the top of rack switches, currently there's only the leaf nodes. You can only assign one role to it, and that's the CRB access role, okay? But you must assign those roles in the wizard. Now, what are those roles? Now, first you need to know that we have this thing called a centrally routed and bridged topology. And the idea in the centrally routed and bridged topology is that the top of rack switches or the leaf devices will do no routing. They'll only do the layer 2 VXLAN gateway function. If you need a layer 3 VXLAN gateway function, that function will be done on the spine. So what you need to know is CRB access equals layer 2 VXLAN gateway. Okay, CRB gateway role is a layer 3 VXLAN gateway. Okay, so we're doing central routing. Our routing's done centrally, that is on the spine. So that's that topology. Eventually, we're hoping to have an edge routed and bridge topology where routing can actually be applied here on the leafs. So these would be ERB access role nodes, right? But we can't do that yet. We're not doing that yet, okay? So that's what that topology is. So remember, and in this centrally routed bridge topology, we can route between subnets, between Contrail overlay networks, and that's routing is done on the spine nodes, not the leaf node. And the subnets are private. They're not exposed to the internet, okay? If you wanted internet, you would assign the DC gateway role to the spine device, and it will allow you to be able to route traffic from a Contrail overlay network out to the internet, okay? So we talked about the CRB access role. It's the layer 2 VXLAN gateway function. CRB gateway role is on the spine, a layer 3 VXLAN gateway function. The spine node that's assigned this role will route between 2 or more private overlay networks through a VRF table. So it's, it's a routing instance, a VRF table. And that's what keeps it private. That is, there's no internet access. What happens is if you assign the DC gateway role, routes are still placed in the VRF table, but an extra route is added, this 00 route that has a next table of INET 0. So there's a default route that points to the INET 0 table, and it's in the INET 0 table that now the packets can get routed out to the internet. And we talked about the route reflector role. Okay, so that's it for describing what the Brownfield underlay topology or use case is. So what I want to do is let me make some quick changes and I'll come right back to this video. Okay, as I had mentioned, some of the prerequisites are that you want to make sure that you've got routing for the data plane, right? So you want to be able to make sure that you can route from, for instance, the control node to compute nodes, for instance. And if you remember, we have a compute over here that sits off of a top rack switch on the far side. So if I can ping from the control node over here, things look pretty good. And I also need to make sure that I can ping to the loopbacks of these devices as well. So they need to be reachable from the IP fabric before I do this onboarding. So let's make sure I can do that. Here I'm on the control node, okay? Here I'm on the control node. So let me ping that remote compute, which is 21.6 is the compute 2. So I can ping, so this is pinging from the control node to the remote compute right across the fabric. I also want to be able to ping to here's the 10K's loopback address, no problem. And I want to ping to QFX 5101's loopback, no problem. And QFX 5102's loopback. So things are looking good as far as that's concerned. Now also we have a management network, okay? So we want to verify here, if I go back to our management network, okay? So I'm on the control node. I need to make sure I can reach these devices, 21, 22, and 25 off of this subnet. I want to make sure they're reachable. So let's go here. And so let's go ping to 172.25.11.21 to 1. There we go. So we can ping. That's QFX 5101. This is 5102, and the 10K was 25. Okay, so they're all reachable. Okay, so everything is set up nicely. Okay, let me check my list of things I want to do. I've checked my routing in the data plane. I've checked my management. I've checked that the loopbacks are reachable. Now I want to run the Brownfield wizard to do these things, which is discover the devices. I want to assign the roles and then auto configure the overlay, that EVPN VXLAN overlay. So to do that, we need to bring up the Contrail command user interface. We'll do here. Okay. All right, so now I'm into Contrail command. I just happen to be under the fabrics area, and under fabrics I have no fabric in this, and that's perfect because we want to onboard our fabric. That's our whole goal. So we're going to hit create, and when we go hit create, we want to mention we need to specify whether we want to do the green field, which would be a new fabric, an unconfigured fabric that we want to auto configure the underlay and the overlay. At the existing fabric, we have a IP fabric that's out there. It's configured with the routing protocol already, can route between subnets, and we just want to auto onboard it and auto configure the overlay EVPN VXLAN network. So we'll click existing fabric. Okay, it's pretty simple. Under the existing fabric, we give that fabric a name. I'm going to call it a Brownfield fabric. Now, what the Contrail control node is going to do, it's going to attempt to SSH to each of the devices. So you want to make sure that your IP fabric devices are all configured with the same username and password. In my case, it's lab123. Okay, so we want to make sure our SSH succeeds. We want to set the overlay ASN. The default overlay ASN for EVPN VXLAN on Contrail is 64512, so we'll just leave it alone. But so this will be for our IBGP EVPN session. Then we have these node profiles, and these auto-populate. You can remove them if you want to, whichever ones you don't care about. I know for a fact that we only need the 10K and the 5K lean, but if we had 5110s, then we would need the 5K, and if we had an MX in our topology, we would need this MX profile. And the whole idea with these is each device will be assigned a profile, and the profile basically tells the Contrail how to configure these devices, because you probably are aware that an MX is configured differently for VXLAN than a 10K, than a 5110, and then also differently than a 5100. Okay, and then you need to specify the management network, the network that will be used to discover these devices. Okay, remember it's the 172.25.11 network. Now, I could list each one out as a /32. That's totally possible in here. So in this box, or here I can add several different subnets if I want to. So I can list my individual hosts out if I wanted to. But in this case, I'm just going to put in a /24. And what it's going to do, it's going to, when it goes to discover, it's going to attempt to log in via SSH using this username and password, lab123, into every host, all 254 hosts on this subnet. And it's going to look to find one of these types of devices, and if it does, it will add it to its onboarded IP fabric. And then the gateway here is recommended that you, and just for this brownfield use case, you specify the control node as the default gateway. Okay. All right, and then at this point we click next, and that'll take us to device discovery, where it automatically tries to discover these devices. Okay. So what we get here is this shows you what's actually been discovered, and this shows you some logs. Now this is a highlight of the logs that are going on. There's actually on the control node, you can issue this command. Let me get it up. Tail -f var log Contrail fabric Ansible playbooks.log, and you can actually see a log of the Ansible playbooks that are running based on this discovery process that we're going through right now. So here we see kind of an overview, but these are like the details over here. So I actually like to look at these at the same time. I have it running on the background. And we'll also have a bar here that will fill up with blue, and eventually when it becomes solid, it'll become green. So eventually when this process is over, discoveries is finished, this line will turn green and this next will become ungrayed. So we're kind of waiting for that. And you'll notice if you have these running in the background that the moment that these stop, that's when all of those two things happen. What we can tell here is that it's gone through and found these three devices, but now it's also, and it's now we can see it's found their Junos OS version, their serial number. It's assigning them one of those profiles we talked about earlier, and grabs their host name. That's how all that stuff populates here. So it's discovering right now those devices. It's also discovering the number of interfaces. It's doing a lot of stuff. It's not actually configuring anything on those devices right now. It's only logging in, getting status, and preparing them by placing them here for the auto configuration, which will happen here on step 4. So we're just going to wait until this is done, and once this turns green, I'll come back to the video. Okay, so the fabric discovery is complete. We've discovered our 3 devices that we wanted. Okay, we see here in the background that our Ansible playbooks have stopped. This next button has become ungrayed. I can click it now. And now it's on step 3 when I click next that we're going to assign roles to each of these. So if we remember, on the 10K we wanted to have for sure, well, the physical role it's in the spine role, okay? And to spine nodes, we can assign one of 3 functions. It's required for 5.0.2 that you assign a route reflector. If you do assign a route reflector, it has to be first. So click that one first. Okay, in our case, we want our spine to be a CRB gateway. So I'll click CRB gateway. Okay, so now if you look, we have the spine node, the route reflectors first, CRB gateway second. Now we hit assign. Again, not configuring anything yet. It won't auto configure anything until I click auto configure. And then for my leaf nodes, which I'll because they're going to get the same assignments, I'll click on those two and say assign roles. Now I can assign to both of them at the same time. I'm going to assign the role of a leaf node, and you'll notice there's only one option, which is CRB access, which is the layer 2 VXLAN gateway function. Okay, then we just hit assign. Okay, so now you've basically told it what type of config to apply to these devices. QFX10K is going to be a route reflector. It's going to do routing between overlay networks, so it'll have to act as a layer 3 VXLAN gateway, and these two devices down here will have to act as layer 2 VXLAN gateways. Okay, so nothing's actually been configured at this point. They've only been discovered. You've now assigned the roles that you want to be auto-configured. Now we hit auto-configure, and this is where all the magic happens. It's going to automatically go through and configure each one for the overlay network. Okay? Now, one little problem with 5.0.2 is this finish button is automatically available to you. So you'll see that the finish button is available. This line is turned green. So the reality is this doesn't really tell you too much, the button and that on this assign roles section or auto configure section. What really tells you what's going on is the tail minus F that's going on in the back. So what I like to do is just wait and make sure that runs properly before I consider clicking finish. So let's go back here. So that's what we're waiting. So right now it's auto. Now it says underlay configured, and that comes from the green field. There's nothing, it just kind of bypasses the underlay configuration in the brownfield. Okay, so it's gone past where it would normally do that under green field, and it's waiting now to configure the overlay. And so what you're going to see if you watch these and you look at them, what it's doing is it's building configs on the Contrail control node for each of the devices, and it will eventually push those configs out onto each of the individual IP fabric nodes. Okay, and we'll see what those the configurations look like in the end. So what I'm going to do is this takes some time. I'm going to pause this video and come back to it once the auto configuration is complete. Okay, so here we've seen the Ansible logs have stopped. Lines green, finish is here. So now we're good. It's been onboarded. So now I can say finish. And here you see all the details. There's some other learning bytes where I go into things like assigning CSNs and what that's for and all that good stuff. But that's essentially it. So if we go now and check, we can see now that these have been onboarded. We can see it right here. Okay, we have a fabric called Brownfield. It's been onboarded. Here's the devices that we have available to us. Okay, so now we can do things like add bare metal servers to Contrail virtual networks and either switch or bridge or route between them with virtual machines or what have you. So let's go and just double check what's happened. If I go here to, for instance, the 10K, if I say show BGP summary, I want you to know that before we did this onboarding, I had pre-configured these sessions here, which were our EVPN sessions for the underlay routing. But on our behalf, Contrail Enterprise Multicloud configured these EVPN sessions because it's the route. It's the 10K is acting as a route reflector. With these three clients, we have QFX 5101, 5102, and the control node, right? And they're all established, so that's good. I can actually see what was configured by saying show pipe compare to rollback 1. And here we'll see that all the configuration that was pushed here from Contrail is done in groups. So there's a group called Contrail Overlay BGP. So it's pushed on, it's got the autonomous system number, which will be used for the overlay, right? It's got the overlay BGP, which again is the family EVPN, right? It's configured it as a route reflector with that statement here. And then here are its clients, which are the devices. We showed that those are established sessions, right? So this is already auto configured for us. Also, policy's been configured for us here. I'm not going to go into the details of what these are. Again, you can tell that this is pretty tedious configuration, but all this is to bring up an EVPN VXLAN overlay. Now, currently, we haven't added any bare metal servers or VMs to anything yet, so you don't see any EVPN routes being advertised other than maybe some of the default ones. But let's see, run, show BGP summary. Yeah, we see, you know, a couple routes coming from the Contrail control node, but that's good enough. All of that was auto configured for us, right? And that's the big benefit of the fabric management features, is the auto configuration of all that stuff. So that's essentially it. Let me bring this back up. That was Brownfield. So that's it in this section. So in this learning byte, we describe the benefits of onboarding an IP fabric to Contrail Enterprise Multicloud. We described the steps to onboard it, and then we showed you the resulting EVPN overlay configuration that was configured for you. And that's it for this learning byte. I have more, so I hope you enjoy those too. Thank you very much.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Network's certification program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.